tablets, and smartphones. Comcast also has a dedicated customer support team in our new Accessibility Center of Excellence. We're committed to extending the very best accessibility features and support services, including those developed by Time Warner Cable across the combined company's portfolio. Comcast recognizes that improving customer service is another critical issue. Comcast has invested billions of dollars in network infrastructure, greatly improving service reliability and reducing trouble calls. We will do the same here in New York. We are also deploying innovative products and features to make it easier and more convenient for customers to interact with us. We offer 1 to 2 hour service appointment windows. Comcast recognizes that improving customer service is another critical issue. Comcast has invested billions of dollars in network infrastructure, greatly improving service reliability and reducing trouble. We offer more self-installation options so customers can install and activate services without a service call. And we've given customers access to the same diagnostic tools used by our customer care agents. any program of its kind by any company anywhere in the United States. The transaction will expand that program to low-income students and families throughout the Time Warner footprint, including here in New York. The transaction offers other important public benefits too. For example, Comcast will extend its industry-leading diversity programs and unique external joint diversity advisory council to the acquired Time Warner cable systems, bringing greater diversity in governance, employment, suppliers, programming, and community investment. Comcast will similarly extend public interest commitments from the NBC Universal transaction, such as making local, diverse, and children's programming available on various platforms, such as video on demand and TV everything. Comcast also has a proven commitment to local communities and organizations. Since 2001, Comcast has invested over $3.2 billion in cash and in-kind contributions supporting local nonprofit organizations and other charitable partners. Beyond financial gifts, Comcast shares its greatest resource to people in giving back to local communities. Last year, our employees and their families gave back in a day of service called Comcast Cares Day, and they contributed in one day more than 500 million hours of of service to include schools, parks, senior centers, and other vital community organizations. On top of all of these significant benefits, and contrary to what some critics say about reduced choice for consumers, this transaction does not take away a choice for video voice or broadband users. Instead, this transaction takes one of the choices that New Yorkers have today and transforms it. It transforms that choice into a better video provider, transforms that choice into a more robust IP-based voice provider. It transforms that choice into a faster, more innovative broadband provider. In short, one of the choices you have today becomes a better choice tomorrow. In closing, upon approval of this transaction, New Yorkers can expect to benefit from next-generation video technologies with more programming choices at home and on the go, best-in-class voice products, enhanced competition for advanced business and wireless backhaul services, and faster, more reliable, and more secure internet services, a commitment to greater broadband adoption, diversity, accessibility, and investment in local communities, and a laser-like focus on improving customer service. As Comcast record from prior transactions demonstrates, we are a company that not only keeps but often over-delivers on our promises. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Our next speaker is Dilara Darashani. Ms. Darashani serves as Policy Counsel in the Washington office of the Consumer Union, where she is the lead advocate for the Organization of Telecommunications, Media, and Privacy Efforts.
Thank you all so much for having me here today. My name is Dilara Darashani, and I serve as Policy Counsel for Consumers Union, the advocacy arm of Consumer Reports magazine. Consumer Reports is the largest independent product testing organization with a mission to work for a fair, just, and safe marketplace. In addition to our testing and national survey capabilities, we rate thousands of products and services each year for more than 8 million subscribers. And as part of our advocacy efforts, we engage in a dialogue with consumers and work to protect them against abusive practices in the marketplace. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This proposed merger is not in the public interest. Comcast and Time Warner have made a number of promises about how this deal will benefit consumers. But the reality is that this deal would give Comcast enormous power and unprecedented dominance in the marketplace. If the merger is approved, the company will control over 2/3 of all cable television customers and nearly 40% of all high-speed internet customers in the United States. The result would be higher prices, fewer choices, and worse customer service for New Yorkers and for consumers all across the nation. To put it simply, this deal should be rejected. Consumers across the nation are already riddled with price hikes and lousy customer service. Each year, the cost of cable continues to rise sharply, according to the FCC's figures, many times the rate of inflation. And many consumers find themselves having to buy larger and larger packages of expensive cable programming just to get access to some of the programming that they truly want. And in New York, the story is no different. According to recent press reports, the cost of standard cable package, the required monthly rate to rent a set-top box in order to get your cable to work, and the cost of internet service all continue to rise in New York. And at the same time, despite the rising prices, consumers nationwide have told us that they are dissatisfied with the service that they're receiving from these two companies. According to the latest reader survey that Consumer Reports, Comcast and Time Warner Cable are among the worst companies in customer satisfaction for TV service. Comcast ranked 15th among 17 television service providers included in the rating and earned particularly low remarks for value for money and customer support. Time Warner Cable ranked 16th overall for television service with particularly low ratings for value, reliability, and phone and online customer support. It's hard to see how combining these two companies that already have a poor track record with consumers would somehow improve the situation for customers here in New York or anywhere else. To the contrary, combining these two companies would give the merged entity an even larger national presence, more market power, and less of an incentive to address consumers' needs. I've just described to you an industry in which consumers are stuck with rising bills, limited in their choice of providers, have to pay monthly subscription fees for large packages of content, some of which they may not even want, and endure frustrating experiences with customer service. At Consumers Union, we've engaged in a dialogue with consumers who will be most impacted by this merger, and they've told us exactly how they feel. In April 2014, just recently, in a nationally representative survey, we found that most Americans are opposed to the proposed merger between Comcast and Time Warner Cable. Our poll showed that only 11% support this merger, while 56% oppose it, with another 32% with no opinion on the deal. Large majorities of consumers agree that this deal will hurt them by leading to higher prices, fewer choices, and reduced incentives to provide good customer service. Specifically, 74% believe there would be price hikes. 74% were concerned that smaller companies wouldn't be able to compete. And 2/3 believe that Comcast would have little incentive to improve customer service. Not only that, but more than half actually thought that customer service would get worse. Consumers were also skeptical about the benefits that would accrue to them in the deal. Only 16% believe that Comcast will pass along any proposed benefits or any efficiencies that that may result from the deal, resulting in actual benefits for them. And only 12% of Americans overall believe that mergers like this are actually good for the economy. Furthermore, right here in New York, we've received hundreds of complaints, which are on file with our organization. I wanted to recount just a couple of them that I think really highlight the types of experiences and frustrations that consumers are experiencing. For example, Barbara P. from New York City, who pays $127 a month for Time Warner service, said, "To allow this merger to take place is to allow the lowest rated cable providers to merge. Let each company work on improving service to existing customers before even thinking about merger." And Alfred W. of Brewster, New York, who's a Comcast customer, noted that every time he makes a complaint, it's met with efforts to upsell on equipment. He said, "The latest is that I was told that unless I upgrade, they won't come out to see me to tell me what's wrong, even though it's the same problem with their wiring that has occurred for about twice a year now for the last 10 years." And finally, one last example. Ted V. of Mendon, New York, who's a Time Warner customer who pays $175 a month. And he expressed to us his feeling that the lack of competition in the Rochester, New York area, results in higher prices for broadband services that perform at lower speeds than in areas where there is actually competition. So before I conclude my remarks, I'd like to mention that our organization is also very concerned about the issue of net neutrality and maintaining an open internet. The concept that internet service providers can restrict online content easily. The FCC is currently considering new net neutrality rules that may enable internet service providers to sell preferential access to content providers who are willing to pay for it. And this would give Comcast, especially after this merger, new power to play favorites among websites and services and to control the quality, speed, and availability of online. This merger would only further increase the concerns we have about net neutrality. In conclusion, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you before you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Our next speaker is Susan Lerner, Common Cause New York. Ms. Lerner is the Executive Director of Common Cause New York, has been an activist for over 30 years. She speaks and writes extensively on, among many other subjects, media and democracy issues.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Common Cause New York is a leading force in the battle for honest and accountable government. And Common Cause nationwide has a national media and democracy reform initiative, which is aimed at spotlighting and countering the growing political and economic power of the communications industry. Here in New York, we've taken active positions on telecommunications and other media matters, ranging from the Verizon Fios contract here in New York City, internet access in New York City parks, to oversight of cable franchise agreements, just among a few. We've worked with a broad range of groups throughout the state on media and telecom matters. And I'm very grateful to the Commission for holding this public forum, and also for the opportunity to discuss the proposed Time Warner Cable merger, the Time Warner purchase by Comcast. At Common Cause, we're very grateful for the recent change in New York state law, which sets what we believe is an appropriate standard requiring that the proposed merger be in public interest in order for it to be approved. We believe strongly, along with our coalition partners, Consumers Union, and several groups which are here today, that this proposed acquisition simply cannot meet that standard and should not be approved by the Public Service Commission. We're concerned with the negative impact which the formation of such a huge entity will have on what is the necessary vigorous marketplace of ideas that's essential for the well-functioning of our democratic system. The ability of a really colossal entity to play favorites, and unfortunately, the experience in other marketplaces and as a result of other mergers, leads us to conclude that Comcast, unlike its very smooth presentation here today, actually has an election for playing favorites and for using this market power. The FCC has found that it has, in at least one instance, violated the merger conditions for the Comcast-NBC merger in a move having to do with its cable TV lineup, which negatively impacted its competitor Bloomberg TV, and placing Bloomberg TV very high up in the lineup, keeping it out of the really popular area of the channel lineup in order to advantage its own business network subsidiary, MSNBC. And the FCC has ordered it to make a change in that regard. We believe that there are other anti-competitive practices which Comcast has used its market power to engage in. Comcast has set when it was forcing a data cap situation on its customers, it chose to exempt its own video on-demand services from the cap charge, from the cap that consumers were facing, but counted the downloads of its competitors towards that cap. What we believe is clearly an anti-competitive practice, and we believe probably also violates the terms of the NBC-Comcast merger. So it really, we're also concerned with the increased political power which an entity of this size and this degree of resources would have here in New York State. Telecom companies, Time Warner among them, are among the largest spenders on lobbying and significant campaign contributors. And in fact, last year, we at Common Cause New York issued a report in our influential Moreland Mondays series, where we suggested to the Moreland Commission on Corruption that they should look seriously at the political spending by the telecom industry because of the way in which we believe it influences public policy, often not to the public good. We can look at other jurisdictions to see the way in which Comcast behaves as a public citizen, and the significant anti-regulatory, anti-consumer measures, which it relentlessly pushes in states throughout the country, North Carolina and South Carolina being an example, recent example, where its efforts along with other industry giants to stop municipal broadband services was successful, and its continuing efforts, so far unsuccessful in Kansas and Utah this year, to stop municipalities from providing affordable access to broadband when they believe that their citizens would benefit from the municipal system. I'd also like to point out, in terms of the competitive marketplace, it was very interesting that Univision recently has spoken out against this merger because it believes that it has been discriminated against, similarly to the way that Bloomberg TV has been discriminated against by Comcast, which uses its market power. And finally, I'd like to, well, actually not finally, I'd like to talk a bit about the business climate here in New York City and the investment which New York City and other areas of our state have made in fostering a climate for tech innovation and internet startups. Some of you may have seen an interesting map which appeared on the New York Times website in the last week or so that actually shows the various areas of the city in which you have clusters of tech startups, which are an expanding number. And the city has invested quite a bit in encouraging tech startups with the idea of now fostering something called Silicon Alley here in New York City. And of course, you're familiar with the concept of the Tech Valley in the capital and surrounding regions. And Buffalo now has joined in and is trying to become a tech incubator as well. We are very much concerned about Comcast pricing practices as far as broadband access is concerned for businesses and for others. We understand that Comcast has indicated that it will impose a regional pricing structure here. And many of the broadband services in other states are priced at a much higher price point than either freestanding broadband or packages here in New York State. This could have an immediate deleterious impact on the government policies which seek to encourage tech startups and entrepreneurship here in New York. And I apologize that there's a typo in my written testimony when I refer to 50% of the workplace being made up of freelancers and self-employed people. It's actually 30% made up of freelancers and self-employed. But I think we see it very, very directly here in New York City. And people who have a need for reliable, affordable, individual broadband, a graphics designer who works at home, a video editor who works out of their apartment, may not be in an area where you would expect to have a high-speed broadband. And they're probably not buying a business package, but they would be getting a residential package, now we believe most likely more highly priced by Time Warner, making it more difficult. 85% of businesses in New York are small businesses. Many of them survive because of their access to the internet. Certainly, many small retailers find it absolutely essential to supplement their in-store purchases with e-commerce. Large amounts of information which have to be uploaded and downloaded. What impact is a data going to have on those businesses? We suggest it's going we're very concerned about that because, as everybody points out, small business is the engine of our economy. Our economy is sputtering at the moment, and anything which adds hundreds of dollars to monthly costs for small businesses is simply a burden which we should resist very vigorously. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet Essentials program, and just to say that it's always interesting to follow an industry spokesperson who paints a very, very rosy picture, and to wonder why it is that there is such an extraordinary disconnect between the wonderful programs that they outline and the sorts of consumer responses that my colleagues at Consumers Union are finding. And unfortunately, the situation with Internet Essentials is all too similar. A very different world view from the provider of the idea and the people who actually are supposed to benefit from it. It's a good idea as far as it goes, but we are concerned with a number of different aspects. Number one, given the really substantial problem of the digital divide, why limit it to families with school-aged children? And not only families with school-aged children, but only families who qualify for the free lunch program. In discussions with our high school interns, they tell us that only a small percentage of their school population actually qualifies for the free lunch, and yet the schools find that significant numbers of students need assistance. But what about low-income seniors? What about low-income people living on their own, families without children who need internet services and who are unable to afford them or for whom they're just not available? We hear from our colleagues in other states that there are significant barriers to taking advantage of Internet Essentials. It's already a program which is targeted at a very limited population, and the population within that limited number is already further limited by barriers which Comcast places in front of applicants. And the fact that this program that they talk a lot about to regulators and to press has such a low participation rate in the target population really raises questions about their follow-through. It's very easy, it's great to announce a good program with fanfare and to brag about it to regulators. It's a lot harder to sustain the program and to make it really attractive to the people that it should be benefiting. And so the explanation and the actual real world experience just does not jive. And unfortunately, when we look at Comcast performance with other mergers, in other jurisdictions, and with other programs, we see too stark of a difference between what they promise that they will deliver and what they actually deliver when the rubber hits the road. So we believe that there are significant problems here, and we believe that simply conditioning the merger is not going to solve our concerns based on the experience we see in other jurisdictions and with earlier mergers. Here in New York, we have the advantage of being able to see how Comcast actually performs in the real world after other merger conditions and in other jurisdictions. And we believe that their performance, it raises real concerns. And we think that once the record is fully established in this proceeding, that it will not support a finding that this merger is invalid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mark Malaspina, President of Computer Review. Mr. Malaspina oversees the nationwide program of innovation for computer review, including the organization's school-based programs to help low-income families adopt use broadband effectively to support their children's education.
Good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to contribute our insight as the New York State Public Service Commission evaluates the potential merger of Comcast and Time Warner Cable. CFY does not take an official position for or against the potential merger of Comcast and Time Warner Cable. Instead, the purpose of our testimony is to focus on a very important merger consideration. How exactly would Comcast operationalize its commitment to provide essential low-cost broadband service to low-income families in the Time Warner Cable service area in New York State? In its existing service areas, Comcast operates the Internet Essentials program, which provides eligible low-income families with the opportunity to obtain low-cost broadband service and a refurbished computer. We believe that Internet Essentials has strong potential to benefit low-income families, but we recommend 3 important improvements to Internet Essentials if it is rolled out in the Time Warner Cable service area. First, to implement innovative outreach strategies involving schools and teachers. Second, to avoid enrollment obstacles. And third, to support continued enrollment by the families. Before discussing these recommendations, I'd like to provide some background about CFI's experience in helping low-income families adopt broadband service. Founded 15 years ago, CFI helps low-income children succeed academically by enabling their families and teachers to leverage the power of digital learning and personalized instruction and driving student self-directed learning. We have directly served more than 16,000 students in high-poverty schools across the country, involving schools also across the 5 boroughs in New York City. Our approach has 2 components. First of all, we provide students and their families with home learning technology and hands-on training in using technology to support student learning. After receiving training, families receive titled home learning centers, which are refurbished laptops or desktops, pre-imaged with Microsoft Office and educational software across all subject areas. We also provide families with information about broadband enrollment, including details of any available broadband discount programs. Secondly, we provide teachers with professional development workshops and consulting to help them implement blended learning practices that engage students effectively in the classroom and extend learning to the home. We also inform teachers about the broadband sign-up process so that they can motivate and encourage families to enroll. Based on our experience, CFI was chosen as the lead program partner for 2 large federally funded initiatives designed to increase and sustain home broadband adoption among low-income families in New York City from 2007 to 2013. Through these programs, CFI served a total of more than 27,000 families across more than 80 high-poverty schools in all 5 boroughs. The programs are funded primarily by the U.S. Department of Commerce and operated by the New York City Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications and the New York City Department of Education. Through our rolling survey work with families prior to program implementation each year, we found that approximately 50% of families in these schools did not have home broadband before they received the program. This lack of home broadband was a serious issue both for the affected families and for the entire school community. In order to drive broadband adoption among these families, CFI implemented our standard program components for families and teachers. We also implemented innovative discounted broadband programs with 2 local broadband providers, Time Warner Cable and Cable. We negotiated the best terms we could with each provider and memorialized those terms in a signed agreement with each provider, in which the provider committed to offer the discount for the life of the federally funded initiative and to ensure a 5-year discount for all families that enroll. We set up a comprehensive system to enable families to sign up for the broadband discounts through an online system, and we provided multilingual staff support to help families move through the entire enrollment process all the way from initial application to installation. More than 86% of the New York City families who initially did not have home broadband prior to the program successfully subscribed to home broadband after our program implementation. Some of the families enrolled in these discount broadband programs and others enrolled in market rate broadband programs, either with these providers or other providers. We believe we have gained some important insight into the challenges and solutions of driving broadband adoption among low-income families. We believe that Comcast Internet Essentials program is a promising initiative, but we have 3 program recommendations based on our experience in New York City and other regions. First, to implement innovative outreach strategies involving schools and teachers. In our experience, schools and teachers are very important agents of change in driving broadband adoption among low-income families. Families generally have a good level of trust in schools and individual teachers. Moreover, school leadership understands the importance of broadband for student learning, and teachers are highly motivated to serve as partners in the family broadband adoption process so that they can adopt internet-based instructional strategies that extend learning beyond the limited classroom time. We found that teachers were essential partners for us in encouraging families to attend our workshops and enroll in broadband, and we attribute much of our program success to the fact that we work closely with schools and teachers in implementing the program. Based on this experience, we encourage Comcast to explore ways in which they can coordinate with schools and teachers in supporting low-income families. Strategies could include A, sponsoring school-based workshops for families to learn how they can support their children's learning and understand the benefits of enrollment, and B, providing teachers in Comcast service areas with Internet Essentials information that they can provide to those families who do not have broadband at home. Our second recommendation is to avoid enrollment obstacles. For our work in New York City, we believe that it is important to consider 3 important obstacles that could face New York State families who seek to enroll in Internet Essentials. One very important obstacle is speaking language. Many of the adults in the families we serve were native speakers of languages other than English and had limited English ability. And we found these families needed significant hands-on multi-language support in order to move successfully through the application and enrollment process. It will be critical for Internet Essentials to fully support families with a range of home languages, not just Spanish, in order to meet the needs of families in New York State. A second obstacle is ineligibility based on recent service. Our understanding is that Internet Essentials is not open to families who have subscribed to Comcast Internet service within the last 90 days. Our agreement with Time Warner Cable did not contain this restriction, and we think the restriction would create unnecessary obstacles for families. We recommend that the unrestricted approach that we negotiated with Time Warner Cable be considered for the Internet Essentials program as well. A third obstacle is ineligibility based on prior arrears. Our understanding is that Internet Essentials is not open to families with an overdue Comcast bill or unreturned equipment. Although we fully understand the motivation behind this policy, we recommend that these rules be reconsidered based on our experience with Cablevision and Time Warner Cable. Per our agreement with Cablevision did not permit families to enroll in the discount program if they had any previous bill that was 45 days past due. We found that this rule posed a very significant obstacle to enrollment, as many families were either unable to pay off the arrears, or other families seemed to lose trust in the entire program, as they came to view the entire discount program as a ruse to get them to pay up past debts. On the other hand, Time Warner Cable agreed to a more accommodating approach in which families could enroll even if they had a past due bill based on services or unreturned equipment of up to $300. Moreover, Time Warner Cable fully forgave any past due bill of up to $300. This policy posed substantially less of an obstacle to families in the Cablevision program, and it built the family's confidence that the program was not a debt collection vehicle in disguise. Our third recommendation is to support continued enrollment. It is important that low-income families are supported not only in adopting discounted broadband, but also in continuing to be enrolled in discounted broadband over time. In other words, the measurement of program success should be total adoption over time, and initial adoption plus retention, not just initial adoption. One important issue related to continued enrollment is residential mobility. Because rates of residential mobility among low-income families are often high, it is important that families receive support and guidance on retaining discounted broadband services as they move. The broadband providers with whom we worked in New York City did not have defined protocols for supporting families who moved, and often we had to support families to request discounted service in the new location without going through the entire eligibility review process all over again. Based on our experience, we recommend that the Internet Essentials program incorporate effective protocols for supporting low-income families if such protocols are not already in place. A second important issue related to continued enrollment is ineligibility based on modified service. We know that a portion of families who initially enrolled in the Cablevision and Time Warner Cable discount programs upgraded their service, e.g. paying market rates for faster speeds, and then later decided to go back to the discount program when their economic circumstances changed. It was very important for families to have this flexibility without becoming ineligible for the discount program. We therefore recommend that the following language in the Internet Essentials terms and conditions be reviewed and potentially modified, as it appears to indicate that families who upgrade their service may be rendered ineligible for Internet Essentials going forward. Quote, program participation also may be terminated if the covered service is upgraded, altered, or changed by you for any reason. End of quote. To summarize, we are passionate believers in the power of technology to support learning, and we believe the Comcast Internet Essentials program offers tremendous potential to support low-income families. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts about how the Internet Essentials program could be even better if it were to roll out in Time Warner Cable's service area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malmsteen. And our final speaker tonight is Michael Santiago, temporarily is the director of the Advanced Communications Law and Policy Institute at New York Law School, where he also serves as an adjunct professor affiliated with the school's Institute for Information Law and Policy. As an ACLP director, Mr. Savarelli oversees the program's main research and writing efforts, a major component of which involves the examination of the array of broadband and technology policy issues affecting New York City and New York State.
Thank you, Judge. And Chair Zimmerman, Commissioner Brand, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. First and foremost, I appreciate the Commission leading by example on its energy efficiency initiative. The conditions review.
I was going to say, given the lateness of the hour and our appreciation we're all here, we all want to get casual and take off the jackets. We won't harm. So let's read by example right here.
Anybody still got a suit coat on? Instead.
So you're already getting us.
But thank you very much for the opportunity to participate this morning. I'm really honored to be here to contribute to these very important discussions. Before I start, I just wanted to note up front that I'm here in my individual capacity as someone who's spent much of the last decade studying these issues involved in this discussion, and someone who's benefited immensely from the wisdom of just a broad array of stakeholders, public policymakers, et cetera, in the public, not-for-profit, and private sector. And I'm also here as a lifelong resident of New York. And I also wanted to note up front, for what it's worth, that New York Law School has been supported by a wide range of firms in the technology space, firms, individuals, foundations that have over the years included firms like Microsoft, Google, foundations like Ford, MacArthur, Mozilla, Rockefeller. So I just want to put that out there for whatever it's worth. But my comments here today are my own. Broadband is really critical to New York City and New York State. So much so that I just wanted to acknowledge that the Mayor's Council, Maya Wiley, who's focused on these issues, is really doing some interesting work spearheading inquiries here in the city. The critical nature of broadband, I think, it's increasingly goes without saying, because it has the potential to positively impact every person, every senior citizen, every person with disability, every student, every parent, every teacher. It also has the ability to transform every sector and every institution that touches. And that's what makes it such a powerful and unique technology that has the ability to fundamentally reorient entire sectors and level the playing field. A few years ago, our program at the school issued a report that assessed the impact of broadband on New York. In that paper, we examined the broad array of benefits that high-speed internet access is delivering, or is poised to deliver in key parts of the New York economy and key communities. The analysis included, the paper included data analysis that tracked a growing mountain of data that have emerged in recent years supporting the basic conclusion that broadband, when effectively harnessed, has a range of measurable and unmeasurable impacts on users, many of which differ from community sector to sector. For older adults, for example, broadband is a connector that makes seniors, especially those who are isolated, feel more relevant and connected. For people with disabilities, it enables a universe of accessible content and tools that facilitate a range of new opportunities. For students, it delivers more targeted learning opportunities, connects parents with teachers, and in a growing number of instances, leads to better outcomes. For residents and businesses in rural communities, broadband is that portion of New York that's well bronze. Broadband also serves as a connector to resources that might not immediately be available, and as a vehicle for delivering critical healthcare and education. And the list of benefits and impacts goes on and on. It spans every sector, every community, every institution in the state. And as a result, public awareness of these benefits is increasing in kind. And more people go online and use their connections to meet their individual needs. And from a public policy standpoint, The emergence of broadband as an impactful and versatile tool has become central to the short-term and long-term economic development plan. All of its many uses and benefits work in concert with efforts to position the state as a leader in technological innovation, be it in producing semiconductors, conducting cutting-edge scientific research, or serving as a hub for high-tech startups. So realizing the many possibilities of broadband is incredibly hard work. These efforts are bigger than one company or one merger. To get to where we as a state, as a community, need to be requires concerted, collaborative action to figure out the best, most sustainable way forward. To these ends, Governor Cuomo in particular is to be commended for his vision and his leadership on these issues. His administration has been extremely proactive in not only setting goals, but also deploying a diverse array of programs and initiatives that constitute an all-of-the-above strategy for bolstering broadband throughout the state. His administration, for example, has committed tens of millions of dollars in funding, more than any state in the country, to seed public-private partnerships to support deploying broadband to areas in the state that remain unserved. The governor has launched an ambitious program, Start New York, to lure new businesses to the state. Robust availability of broadband is increasingly essential for those efforts. And the state is poised to vote in the fall on a smart schools initiative, a bond initiative that promises to, among many other things, modernize technology infrastructure in schools across the state. And through agencies like Empire State Development and Broadband Program Office, the state has emerged as a true leader in developing and implementing effective technology-neutral strategies that are tailored to work with a hugely diverse array of communities and geographies and demographics. So in short, progress is being made on all fronts. Gaps in availability are being reduced. The broadband adoption rate is slowly inching up. Startups and other technology-focused businesses are choosing New York as their home. But challenges certainly remain. Tens of thousands of households in the state remain unserved or underserved. Many of these households are difficult to reach, making them uneconomic to serve in the absence of some sort of public funding element like Connected Growth Grant. There are also challenges associated with fostering continued innovation and competition among all the firms in the broadband ecosystem, especially those providing internet access service via cable, fiber, DSL, fixed wireless, mobile, satellite. Each of these platforms has played a key role in bringing broadband to some parts of the state, and in all likelihood, they will continue to play key roles in bringing broadband to certain parts of the state. And there are also enormous challenges related to promoting continued adoption of broadband and ensuring that users have the skills needed to put their connections and their broadband-enabled devices to meaningful uses. All of this should serve as the foundation for what we think of as public interest in the context of discussions about broadband in New York. The public interest here revolves around the ability of all stakeholders to align resources in every sector and in every community around shared goals for broadband connectivity. The key question to ask then of any proposed transaction or program or initiative is whether it will make us better off, whether it is worthwhile to shake up the status quo in an effort to overcome the barriers that might be faced with it. So as a general notion, if the actions of a particular entity clash with these ideals, then it's fair to say that they're not acting in public interest. But if they do things or commit to doing things that address these many challenges, then we should say that they are acting in public interest. In the context of this particular transaction, and any major transaction for that matter, it's very tempting and very easy to be cynical about perceived motives or possible outcomes. It's also tempting to look at this proposal through a very broad lens when, in fact, we, the public of New York, need to look at it from the perspective of whether this transaction, or again, any transaction or program or initiative, will help to realize our goals, New York's goals for broadband. And so it's critical that we keep all this in perspective. It's sometimes tempting to look at this merger as a microcosm or a proxy for all the other big macro issues that are being debated at the FCC and elsewhere. And certainly those debates and their outcomes will impact every firm throughout the ecosystem, including the ones that issue here today, as well as consumers throughout the country. But those battles are best fought in other forums, because merger is not the best way to make investment policy. But nevertheless, this process that we're involved in here today affords many opportunities for us, the public, to ask some tough questions about whether the proposed transaction will operate in our interest and will make us as a state better off. Unfortunately, there's no formula that exists to provide us with a definitive answer one way or the other. We can't just plug in a bunch of data and have it spit out a result. But there are a lot of relevant inquiries that can and should be made, and the answers to which should inform this particular discussion. Foremost among these is whether the transaction would contribute to helping us as a state realize core goals for broadband connectivity on both the supply side and the demand side. Our proposed commitments of resources and efforts to leverage scale enough to assist in improving existing networks throughout the state, in building out new ones, and in helping to close stubborn digital divides. There's much data in the public filings and public statements and elsewhere to suggest that the transaction would, in fact, yield more benefits than costs. Some of these points. Another question to ask is how this transaction might impact businesses of all sizes. Will they and their employees be better off? Will the transaction bolster state efforts like Startup in New York, help to fuel more startups, and attract new businesses to the state? Again, there's evidence to suggest that it would likely support efforts to improve network infrastructure for businesses of all sizes. And what about here in New York City? If the transaction were to go through, would the newly formed entity be able to catalyze further innovation? Would it help to spur business creation? Would it help to increase investment in the city's increasingly essential startup space? Would proposed actions align with state and local goals supporting community growth in key sectors and otherwise diversifying economic activity? Again, there's evidence to suggest that it will, in fact, yield better outcomes than continuing forward with the status quo. New York City, in particular, is well positioned to benefit from possible leveraging of existing assets here, like NBC, Comcast, venture funding arm, all of which could assist the newly formed company in immediately establishing it as a partner in helping New York City, potentially other cities throughout the state, cement its reputation as a hub for high-tech innovation. And finally, on an issue that's near and dear to me, is broadband adoption. What about broadband adoption? Is internet essential as well as cracked up speed? We've heard some varying perspectives here. But leaving aside criticisms about alleged shortcomings in programs like eligibility criteria and other aspects, there's substantial evidence to suggest that the program is effective in connecting unconnected low-income community members and working to ensure that they are digitally ready. 1 million internet users is an impressive number. 1 million people who are online who probably would not be online but for the program. And having studied and written about the program in isolation and as part of the analyses of other adoption programs, I truly believe that it could have an enormous impact in New York, and especially here in New York City, which is home to the largest school district in the nation. And what makes it even more exciting, and Mark touched on this in his testimony, is that New York City and New York State is already home to just a broad array of really great digital literacy groups, like Computers for You, Computers for Children, that they testified at the previous hearing, so many others here in the city and the state. And I imagine that all those groups would be very eager to partner with Comcast by Internet Essentials or some other program, some other way, to come up with some really creative solutions to this really endemic, entrenched, complex problems on the demand side. So in closing, I wanted to reiterate the importance of keeping these discussions in proper context. Doing so allows for more merits-based evaluations that revolve around a relatively simple metric of whether transaction or any effort implicating broadband in New York will or will not, on the whole, help to move the needle on core public policy goals for this biotechnology. Thank you again for contributing and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sandberg. That was our final speaker in the information forum. We now have an opportunity for questions. Members of the department staff, any questions or statements they may have. First, Chair Zimmerman.
Just a comment. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for attending this evening, the speakers as well as members of the audience.
We cannot, yeah.
Any of you. All
Please
the
speak louder.
microphones they mute you.
They mute us?
Everybody mumbled. And you have microphones.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Everybody.
I apologize for that. We will endeavor to speak
Turn on
closer
your
to the microphone. Is that okay?
Bitter.
So first of all, I want to thank the speakers, Comcast, for joining us tonight, and all the members of the public. We, on behalf of the commission, this is a very critical component of our deliberation process. It's important for us to hear from the public. We take their comments very seriously, both your oral comments tonight and any written comments that you want to supplement and enter into the record. So again, thank you for being here. And as you know, this process, it will involve public hearings, since we've had 3 so far. And in addition, there will be an opportunity to write formal comments, and as well, our staff itself will be writing comments, and all of which will be eventually considered by the commission to make a determination on the proposed transaction. So again, thank you for being here. I have, if I can, just a question I'd like to ask, actually, to the four of you who testified in terms of the merger. And it seems to me that a little bit of what I've heard, and I just have my own clarification, is that everybody agrees that, and I suspect Comcast too agrees, that one of the outcomes we want to get out of this, and certainly from the commission's perspective, an important outcome, is around universal access to broadband. When I say universal access, it's not just the ability to connect, it's the ability to connect at a price one can afford, and that secondarily that it doesn't act as a limiting factor, as Ms. Lerner, you were suggesting, for others who might want to do alternatives. So the question I had was, and I thought it was an interesting comment, is the issue in front of us now one where, as I believe the gentleman suggested, we can condition it in order to achieve the public interest, or is it something that you're suggesting that because of the scale of the company, Ms. Lerner, that you can't see any conditions? I'm sorry,
Ms. Derek Shaw.
the same thing. Can you conceive of conditions that the commission could impose to address your concerns, or are you suggesting that the sheer scale should be considered by the commission as a threat to getting these concerns addressed? Which then leads me to my next question, is since the situation is clear now that we're not getting the access we want, what's the alternative route that you would suggest would be better for the city?
Well, first, we have 2. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Awesome.
We have 2 concerns. The first is indeed the scale. And the scale, from a public point of view, creates an entity that has so much inherent power, market power, financial power, political power, that it is basically unregulated. Now, not really accountable either to its customers or to the governmental entities with which it enters into contracts with the entities which would then, like the PSC, have oversight responsibility over its conduct. The kinds of penalties, for instance, that you would be able to assess for the conduct here in New York would be barely a pinprick for an entity of the size of a Comcast to be found to have violated conditions. And the second point that I tried to make is that I think we can look at Comcast behavior and promises that it has not fulfilled or either violated in relation to other mergers to raise significant concerns that, yes, I'm sure that there are a host of conditions which we could suggest, which the commission and its staff would be able to recommend, but we have very little confidence that Comcast will actually honor those promises, and we believe that its conduct in relation to earlier mergers shows that it will violate conditions when it feels it's to its advantage, and that the remedies available to government are not going to restrain its anti-competitive self-interest in conduct.
So the consumers union would maintain that any benefits are not enough to outweigh the harms that are likely to result from this deal, and we would maintain that it should be flat. We have there are a few points I want to touch on. First is that determining what's in the public interest is not just limited to a discussion of broadband, obviously a very important part of the discussion, but things such as the consumer experience, I think, play just as important a role. And customer service and the consumer experience. We've heard a lot about the state of that in New York, and there are a lot of concerns that it's not going to get any better. So, oftentimes I noticed that the two companies point to network investment as an indication of how things might get better. But again, we have yet to see that any of these benefits will really pass along to consumers, or that they'll reach all consumers. And the ultimate goal should be to be able to reach consumers in all areas, including rural areas where there may not be as much of an incentive to build out, for example. So we're also concerned about perhaps a bit of an overstatement of the level of competition. There's still a lot of issues, but the broader public interest standard, I think, should seriously consider the consumer's perspective in addition to many of the things that were mentioned today.
CFY is not taking a position on the merger as a whole. We would suggest that if the balance of the pros and the cons are evaluated, that, as we said, the Internet Essentials program, I think, has potential. I do think that this would be an opportunity for Comcast, together with other parties, to revisit some aspects of Internet Essentials, taking into account, for instance, the language issues in New York City, taking into account some of the learnings that we had in programs with Time Warner Cable itself, and make the Internet Essentials program a much, much stronger program. Again, we think it has tremendous potential. And as Michael said, I think it could be transformative if done in fully the correct way. So that would be, we recognize that Internet Essentials is not the only issue here, but for us it would be an important one to consider in its details before we move forward.
So, to your question about the notion of universality, just first, I think most cable franchises already have. That's where with that. Sorry, I'm very soft. Pardon me, but you can hear me. But in terms of the sort of broader notion of universality of broadband in the state, generally, as I mentioned in the testimony, and respectfully, it's you all are very aware of, it's exceedingly complex, and respectfully, it goes beyond this particular proceeding. I've had the opportunity to serve on the New York State Broadband Task Force for the last 6 or 8 months or so. That's really given me a really unique window into the very many challenges that face so many communities, state, the country, et cetera. And so figuring out solutions for these areas where broadband is not available, or areas that are unserved doesn't lend itself to one size fits all. As I mentioned, testimony, it's a more sort of all of the above strategy. Some areas might be amenable to cable, some might be more amenable to fixed wireless, which is an increasingly popular method of bringing broadband to certain areas that are especially geographically remote. The Connect New York program that I think has been mentioned, I think that has been mentioned elsewhere, has also been very successful in seeding these partnerships and bringing a diverse array of stakeholders to the table to figure out exactly which community needs to be served and how to serve those communities in ways that are both economic and that are, again, that reflect the unique topography and demographics of the
I could see you were.
You can see me on the edge of my
Yeah.
seat, right? It's always a challenge when you've got four speakers who raise a lot of different issues and where to begin. So, yeah, I think to answer your question, you were talking about some of the challenges set before you and some of the issues that have been raised tonight about those who don't have access. And they don't have access because the facilities don't run by their door, or they don't have access because of affordable. We have, for those who were participating in the public forum in Albany last night, we talked a little bit about the same issue and talked about Comcast's history of extending its network in adjacent Vermont was one of the examples. And it was in a partnership where the state had identified similar issues to what's being identified here tonight as part of the challenge in New York, at least part of the challenge in more rural New York, that some just don't have a choice running by their doorstep. Or by their car, we heard about last week, and how important it is to have those advanced services running by the door. So we have, as our normal business, extended our network, but also where there are those really remote areas, that it is really difficult to justify the return on investment to extend the network. We have engaged in partnerships similar to the Connect New York partnership with the Vermont Telecom Authority, and that was able to bring our network to those more rural parts of Vermont. And we envision, as we said last night, that there would be an interest on our part in participating in the Connect New York program to bring more people in New York online. But as far as adoption is concerned, we heard a lot this evening about the inadequacies of Internet Essentials. And it's, it feels from our perspective like it's a no good deed goes unpunished moment, because the reality is no other company is stepping up to the plate like Comcast has stepped up to the plate to offer a program that can try to connect people to the internet who, but for this program, don't have the means to be connected. And we talked last night about the fact that we have modified the program because some said initially, this isn't good enough. This isn't really going to meet the needs of individuals who need to be connected. So what do I mean by that? When we launched the program, it was only for the free school and public students, and it was only for public students. And when we talked to individuals, like the individuals you heard this evening, when we talked to policymakers, they said, wouldn't it be great if you didn't limit it just to those who were in public school and those who were in the free school program? We then expanded it to the reduced school lunch program. And then we had instances where there were provision to schools, where 70% of the people in that school are in free or reduced school lunch, but the other 30% aren't. But they, for record-keeping needs, if you will, consider the entire school to be eligible for the free school lunch program. We expanded our Internet Essentials program to meet that. Moreover, when we launched the program, it was 1.5 megabits. We heard from educators, we heard from parents, we heard from policymakers. While we appreciate Comcast's efforts to connect those who aren't connected, 1.5 megabits is enough. We doubled the speed. When we had it at 3 megabits per second, we also heard from people say, for some of these videos that we're looking to download, educational videos, even 3 megabits isn't fast enough to drop the speed up to 5 megabits. So every step along the way, whether it's speed, whether it's those who are eligible, or for that matter, public school, we opened it up to parochial, we opened it up to charter. We have people from cyber schools say, what about us? We opened it to them. We have home schools say, what about us? We opened it to them. So we have changed this program throughout. Where are we today? So we estimate that about 10% of those who are eligible sign up. If you compare that to our regular internet service, we've been at this now for almost 20 years. And we have about 40% of individuals we've had sign up for the service. Are we interested in partnering with more organizations to expand the reach of the programs.
I have one question, sort of as a follow-up. Do any of you believe that the commission could treat the sheer size of the company that we created the combination as conflict of public interest if that combination is not in violation of any laws that we are
The governing combination can't be public.
forbidding laws governing the combination of companies who merger.
So I think the question was, what is there a reason that this could be against the public interest, given the sheer size of the company? And I think that the answer is yes, and I touched on this a little bit in my testimony earlier, in that a large company with a huge national presence may have less of an incentive to address local New Yorkers' concerns, for example. And that's something that I think is likely to result.
Could you restate the question, sir? I'm sorry.
Okay. What I was trying to say is there a basis for the commission to treat the sheer size of the combined company as being contrary to the public interest if there are no laws that dictate that the size of the company or the combination of these companies is illegal or otherwise improper?
In essence, not an antitrust violation. I think that this commission has a separate charge in terms of how it would define public interest from a classic antitrust pro-competition definition. And I think that we have a regulatory framework, and I think we have public expectations in terms of the ability to hold companies accountable and to be able to perform effective oversight, as I think I said in response to the chair's question. And I believe that once, when you have a company with the kinds of market power and actual just economic size of the combined Time Warner Comcast, with the ability of any one state to effectively provide oversight in the public interest becomes limited. And the ability of the state to require remedies which will meaningfully govern the conduct of that large of national of an entity becomes very limited. And that has, I think, a very significant negative impact on public interest.
Everybody doesn't have it.
I would answer the question by saying that I don't think that that's the basis for that inquiry. The scope of the inquiry here before the commission is New York State, and it's been outlined in the filings, and that's where the company merged entities to compete is head-to-head in New York, so it's sort of swapping out one for the other. And as for any potential antitrust violations of behavior, there are ample laws, of course, in New York, federal level, to protect against anything.
So, where it feels like the conversation is going is that things will get so big in New York that we should be afraid of this. And the reality is, though, that the proposal before us is for Comcast to step into the shoes of Time Warner. So then the analysis, I think, should reflect on what do we get from Time Warner today, and what there are better things that you get from Comcast than you can get from Time Warner. So what do I mean by that? Time Warner has said that it will convert to all digital. We have said we will accelerate that schedule to convert to all digital. Time Warner's top speed right now is 100 megabits per second. Comcast is 500. So the materials talk that we submitted and the review, we talked about those differences. One thing though that we haven't really spent much time talking about is that benefit of scale. So people talk about a number of things tonight. We'd like those advanced services, and we'd like for you to also do more for people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum. It takes significant resources to be able to do that. And New Yorkers will have the benefit not only of being able to essentially plug into that network that's all around them, that's more advanced than the network that exists in New York today, but you also think with respect to that reliability, you have the ability with the merger this time for New Yorkers to not only plug into that advanced network, but when it comes to times of crisis, whether it's hurricane or other natural disasters, having that network that is nearby for redundancy, as well as the resources to restore services, meaning people in trucks coming to restore services in a situation like a Hurricane Sandy. If you have a company with scale, you have the ability to lean on those kinds of resources. At the end of the day, we've spent $85 billion investing in our network over the last 15 years. It's not an inexpensive game to play to be able to reinvest in the network and keep meeting consumer demand. The last 5 years, it was $27 billion. Last year, it was $6 billion. So you need a company that's going to have the resources to be able to deliver what consumers want. And we heard a lot of I want tonight. And you need a company not only with the resources, but with the expertise.
Thank you. I don't believe there are any additional questions, so we are going to move on right now to the public statement hearing phase. Proceedings tonight. As I said at the beginning, there's an opportunity for a member of the public who wants to come up here and give their comments. Live and in person, and have them transcribed and made part of the representation. All we ask is that you go to the table back here, fill out a card indicating your interest in speaking. We will then call everybody in the order in which the cards are handed in. And we have 22 individuals who have been on this week. Everybody took 10 minutes. We would be here till close to midnight. So please, if you can, out of consideration, your other interested speakers, try to keep your remarks down as brief as possible. Probably 5 minutes or less. We're going to begin tonight with the New York City Public Advocate, Patricia James.
I'm not sure why the AC is not working. Obviously, in the city council, we've had hearings that have gone past midnight. Sometimes there are city meetings that sacrifice time and create for the public. So,
Could you press the button so we can hear you, please?
I'd rather it get louder.
Thank you. Don't have too many.
Yeah. I could feel that. So, good evening, Chair Audrey Zibelman and members of the New York State Public Service Commission. As New York City's public advocate and chair of the Commission on Public Information and Communications, COPIC, it is my duty to represent and inform the public on relevant changes in communications technology and the effects any such changes might have in our state, in our city, in our communities. The proposed Comcast-Time Warner Cable merger has the potential of carrying considerable implications for New York City consumers, which is why I've come here today and testify. Prior to rendering a decision, the questions that I've heard thus far, to me, suggest a concern that this project is too big to fail, and I would suggest otherwise. The Public Service Commission must thoughtfully and diligently deliberate the effects that the proposed merger would have on New York City residents and New York State residents, and to ensure that the needs of all of our people are best served by any changes that would or could result. The deal would merge Comcast Corporation, which is not only the biggest cable company in the United States, it's also the largest media provider in the world, with Time Warner Cable, the second largest cable company in the country. This merger is highly concerning to any reasonable person with respect to the effects of non-competition on internet and cable customers, as it will likely diminish what is already minimal competition for high-speed internet. So notwithstanding the fact that the law may be silent on this issue, it does raise some antitrust concerns and questions with regards to basic competition in our country and in our city. Currently, United States customers pay more for broadband internet access than those in most other developed countries. Yet more often than not, we receive inferior service with respect to speed and reliability. Specifically in large urban hubs such as New York City and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., residents pay inflated prices for slower internet service. In New York City, competition for service is essentially non-existent, offering customers no option whatsoever and essentially forcing the patronage to a sole provider, which is primarily Time Warner Cable. I've heard from constituents in my former councilmatic district who basically argued with me as to why we did not have more competition in the industry. Accordingly, within New York City, Time Warner Cable can name its price for cable services without threat of competition and little incentive to ensure that service is provided well. This may further degrade without competition, not less. In addition, apart from cable and internet customers, Time Warner Cable and Comcast already have the vast majority of power to set prices on transit and content providers, and that should concern the members of this board, some of whom are direct competitors of content providers owned by Comcast, which certainly sounds ripe for an abuse of power by Comcast towards non-Comcast-owned content providers. Comcast recently acquired NBC Universal, and this merger would consolidate two content empires. Furthermore, if the merger were to succeed, the interconnection market, where Comcast in particular already has tremendous control, would be undoubtedly altered, possibly facilitating Comcast to gain additional leverage in demanding higher payments from transit companies. We must ensure that any approved agreement does not negatively impact the quality and capacity of internet and cable services for New York City consumers. The chair asked earlier about making this conditional. I would ask that you go a little bit further. As this merger is considered, it is critically essential that you assess how our most underserved communities would be impacted. How will this transaction impact the digital divide, which primarily affects low-income and marginalized communities, not only in New York City, but across the state? We must analyze the possible short and long-term social and economic implications of such a decision. Internet service providers that are currently able to charge consumers inflated prices as a result of poor competition. It is possible the merger would only lead to additional price increases, completely shutting off families and individuals already facing difficulty paying for the service. Low-income communities would therefore be disproportionately
excluded from accessing what is now considered a basic form of infrastructure in our society and means of communication, and as a means of communication. In today's world, access to the internet is inarguably critical to function in formal and informal spaces, and the costs to digital segregation are rising. Needless to say, the internet serves as a channel of endless information through which individuals now access the news, employment opportunities, education, entertainment, culture, etc. If accessing the internet becomes more difficult for low-income communities, academic and employment competition may be undermined and would conceivably damage the prospects of upward mobility for low-income New Yorkers and further exacerbate income inequality. If the merger were to pass, Comcast's Internet Essentials program for low-income consumers, currently at a cost of $9.95 a month, would be extended to New York City residents. However, many accuse the program, and we have heard from many in the Office of Public Advocate, of how difficult it is to access via the fact that they established these cumbersome criteria. Additionally, the program evidently offers second-class internet quality and speed, 5 megabytes per second for Internet Essentials, compared to 12 megabytes per second for regular paying customers. In Philadelphia, for example, where Comcast is headquartered, the program has low participation rates and has even caused protests and rallies. Comcast is therefore accused of using Internet Essentials as a public relations scheme in order to have the merger granted, while it simultaneously gains increased profits by acquiring low-income customers in areas in which their service already exists. As a starting point in addressing some of these concerns, and if you are prone to approve this merger, the merger should provide free, yes, free, service to low-income communities. The merger should also include a component for local hiring and job training. Additionally, free Wi-Fi service should be provided in many more parks and playgrounds and public schools. During this time of critical importance, there is also an opportunity for Time Warner and Comcast to modify their terms of service to allow people to securely share their Wi-Fi connection with neighbors or others within range without jeopardizing their profits, of course. The merger cannot allow either company to breach current public good contracts, such as Time Warner's contract to support public access in exchange for their cables running in public right-of-ways. On the contrary, public access channels should be expanded, and diverse and educational programs, particularly children's programs, should be a priority. Last but not least, providers must accelerate deployment of high-speed internet to digitally underserved communities, not only in the city but across the state. Transparency and accountability are imperative in this process. And I urge the Commission to investigate the issues that I have shared this evening. But let me end by saying, please do not be afraid of something that is too big to fail. We've seen how that has had an impact on New York City and on residents across the city of New York. You should raise all of these issues. And if in fact you are concerned about about competition and antitrust concerns, then perhaps you should oppose this. I thank you for this opportunity to testify this evening. And the Office of Public Advocate will continue to monitor the situation. And we will also consider legal options that might be available based on the number of issues and concerns that we have heard from New Yorkers as a result of this merger.
Thank you, Mr.
Hold on. I need the names of the speakers in order to identify.
All right. If I don't say the name correctly, make sure you do when you come up to speak. This is, our next speaker is Ben Kells, New York City Council member. Last name is A-A-R-L-O-S.
Thank you very much to the Commission for having us here and for having the public here, and thank you to our public advocate, Tish James, for being here as an advocate for the people. I'm Council Member Ben Kalos. You can tweet me at Ben Kalos. I'm the Governmental Operations Committee Chair. I give my testimony on behalf of 8 council members: James Baca, Technology Committee Chair; Richie Torres, Public Housing Committee Chair; Stephen Lennon, General Welfare Committee Chair; Jimmy Van Bramer, Majority Leader; Costa Constantinides, Library Subcommittee Chair; Danny Gerard, Education Committee Chair; and Karen Koslowitz, State and Federal Legislation Committee Chair. And you might wonder why all we care about this issue, but it affects so many different areas of the city and all of those subject areas. As Comcast, the largest company in the United States, largest cable company in the United States, seeks to acquire Time Warner Cable, the second largest, with more than 2.6 million subscribers in this state, please use your new regulatory powers to determine whether or not the merger is in the best interest of existing customers and the residents of New York City and state. We believe that such a merger would only be in the public interest if paired with net neutrality and a significant expansion of free and affordable internet access for low-income families and individuals to reduce the digital divide. The Internet Essentials program, launched by Comcast in 2011 to provide low-income households with affordable broadband, is a positive first step, but major shortfalls must be addressed. Only 2.6 million families of the 7.2 million families making under $35,000 in Comcast service area are eligible for the program, as it only applies to families with children eligible for federal free or reduced price lunch. Of that 2.6 million, a mere 300,000 families have applied. This does little to close the digital divide, the gap between those who can afford internet access and those who cannot, a division that entrenches social and economic disparities. We propose that we require the expansion of the Internet Essentials plan for New York customers as cited in Part C, Section 1 of the petition. The transaction will generate other significant public benefits. Internet Essentials must go beyond families with children on free and reduced lunch to provide free access to NYCHA public housing, that's 403,120 residents and 175,587 families in 178,557 apartments. People on unemployment insurance benefits, and institutions serving vital public needs such as 1,700 public schools serving 1.1 million students and 223 public libraries. Free or affordable access should be provided to family and individual recipients of income-qualifying federal, state, and city subsidies. And the loopholes that deny Internet Essentials to old customers, those who have missed a bill in the past, or those who have unreturned equipment must be closed. Closing the digital divide has been a priority for New York City and indeed our nation. The FCC's 2010 National Broadband Plan includes the imperative to create mechanisms to ensure affordability to low-income Americans, noting that only 40% of adults making less than $20,000 per year adopted terrestrial broadband at home, while 93% of adults earning more than $75,000 a year have adopted broadband at home. This has also been a major priority of Mayor and the City Council. Mayor de Blasio has laid out a goal of universal, affordable broadband to ensure all New Yorkers can carry out the fundamental tasks of accessing information, applying for jobs, communicating with coworkers and loved ones that broadband access facilitates. The City Council included the need to expand free Wi-Fi across our public parks and our budget priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. As you consider a merger that will provide Comcast with 40% of all broadband customers in the United States, Comcast and Time Warner must also, and equally importantly, voluntarily abide by the FCC's Title II regulations banning unreasonable or unjust discrimination and ensuring net neutrality. Internet access, no provider, least of all one controlling such a huge share of the internet access, should control the flow of information on the internet by speeding up or slowing down traffic for pay or based on content type.
Currently, the FCC is seriously considering using its authority under telecommunications regulations found in Title II of the Communications Act. Comcast and Time Warner should choose to abide by these regulations voluntarily. All Americans and New Yorkers deserve access to the internet, the same access no matter their income level or content types. The merger between two corporate giants to become providers of one of America's most crucial resources must, if approved, be in the public interest, and only ensuring affordable and unconstrained broadband access will guarantee that. We as representatives of America's most populous city urge you to look towards a future where all families and individuals can reap the benefits of a competitive, free, and open internet. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Andrew Bernardus, representing the Brooklyn Borough President's Office.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Bernardus, Gounardes, and I serve as General Counsel to Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. I offer this statement on his behalf. Thank you to the New York State Public Service Commission for holding this public hearing tonight on the proposed merger of Time Warner Cable and Comcast. It is important and appropriate that the Borough President's Office comment on this proposed merger. I know that there are a lot of questions and concerns that many people have about this merger, and our office echoes the sentiments of both Public Advocate Hayes and Councilmember Kalos in their statements as well. But tonight I want to focus on the issue of public access and how important public access is for the people of Brooklyn. As part of its franchise agreement with the City of New York, Time Warner Cable and all the other cable service providers operating across the city have a contractual obligation to support community access organizations which provide public access services to residents of each borough. These agreements are subject to the approval of the Franchise and Concession Review Committee, on which each borough president sits. When the cable service providers last renegotiated their franchise agreement with New York City, the last administration at Brooklyn Borough Hall made sure that public access was a high priority and that Brooklyn's community access organization, BRIC, received its fair share of support. Why is public access so important? The answer is actually very simple. Public access helps sustain the free society that we all so deeply cherish in this age of digital democracy. When we empower the people of Brownsville and Bay Ridge, of Williamsburg and Brighton Beach, of Canarsie and Cobble Hill, with not only the means of digital information, but the tools to create such digital information, we can break down barriers and unleash opportunities undreamt of across Brooklyn. BRIC provides the only unmet mediated coverage available to community leaders in Brooklyn. BRIC also provides spiritual outreach. More than 20% of BRIC's programming is put on by local religious programming that represents all faiths across our borough. Also provides positive coverage of Brooklyn-based cultural activities that do not get media attention from mainstream media sources. BRIC is a forum in which Brooklynites work together to create a community in our own image. So important when today Brooklyn is one of the hottest brands internationally. Lastly, the important thing about our community access organization is that it provides technical training and jobs. It provides training that allows people not only to make themselves ready for jobs in the media, but also to increase media literacy that is vital to participation in today's world. In this, we have one interest, one Brooklyn. We see the public resources which are part of this agreement as critical to our efforts to bring Brooklyn together as one. Public access to cable channels, to equipment, to free media training, to interconnectivity. These are the tools that every modern society needs to create a true sense of community. The Borough President's Office strongly endorses and supports the work done by our community access organization, BRIC. Brooklyn would not be where it is today without the services and programming provided and available in each of our 2.6 million residents. Public access is so important to Brooklyn, and that is why our office is asking the Public Service Commission, if it sees fit, to approve this merger, to approve it based on the following points. To maintain public, education, and government channel capacities at levels current in the existing franchise agreements. Cablecast public, education, and government channels with the same quality as commercial channels. And keep public, education, and government channels in easily accessed, stable locations. Furthermore, We seek assurances of support for public access services, including vital training, production and distribution services now provided to digitally underserved populations, as well as hyper-local media coverage, regardless of any shift in cable markets facilitated by the concentration of market power. Lastly, we ask for assurances that city revenues from franchise agreements continue at least the current levels. But obviously, we hope to see that increase significantly. The Borough President's Office looks forward to continuing a productive and working relationship with Comcast should this merger be approved. One in which the public interest works hand in hand with a very profitable business, to create a telecommunication system that keeps Brooklyn at the forefront of new technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Our next speaker is William Colebrook, representing Manhattan. William Colebrook, representing the Manhattan Borough. Let me call one again so we can be ready to come up next. Next will be Zephyr.
And thank you. The last name is Colegrove, Colebrove. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm here to review testimony prepared by the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer. Gail Brewer is Borough President of Manhattan. Prior to her election as Borough President, she served for 12 years in the New York City Council, 8 of them as Chair of the Council's Committee on Technology. The Borough President's long been an advocate for consumer rights, as well as an open internet with universal access to broadband. It is in that context that we present our comments today in opposition to the proposed merger between Comcast and Time Warner Cable. It is the role of the Public Service Commission to determine whether this proposed merger is in the best interest of New Yorkers, specifically cable and telephone customers. I would submit that although Comcast and Time Warner do not directly compete for service offerings at this time, the solution is lack of direct competition, not less competition. Instead, I would argue it's in the state's interest to pursue means of implementing more direct competition among cable and telephone providers to improve customer service and bring down prices. Signing off on the proposed merger will create a massive conglomerate, as has been stated, that controls 17 of the 20 largest media markets in the country. The size and scope of this new company would discourage any new companies from attempting entry into the telecom space. Absent any real or perceived future competition, what incentive would Comcast have to bring down prices, pursue innovation, and serve its customers? I would argue very little, and this obviously does not serve the public interest of New Yorkers. Not only would the creation of such a massive company dissuade new companies from attempting to compete in New York, it would also give Comcast unprecedented power to negotiate with networks and content providers. This could potentially threaten the availability of certain types of content for New Yorkers, especially local content. As has been stated previously, we are especially concerned about the impact of this potential merger on public access channels to provide vital, hyper-local information to our constituents. Another important access point for local content here in New York is New York One, which is owned by Time Warner Cable. Given the fact that Comcast also owns NBC, we are concerned about the loss or alteration of New York One's local news coverage, given Comcast's potential interest in promoting NBC. On the internet broadband side, we are concerned about several potential problems in Missouri. First relates to the current federal debate over the future of net neutrality. To protect the internet, we need the FCC to issue strong regulations governing broadband. Broadband carriers should be designated common carriers, and the internet correctly labeled as a telecommunications service. This would help foster competition and access to infrastructure that would allow smaller providers to enter the competitive market. Again, this merger has the potential to create a massive company which would discourage any such competition, which only adds to our skepticism. We are also concerned about Comcast's recent activities related to one of the internet's largest content providers, Netflix. As has been widely reported, Netflix has recently experienced congestion on Comcast networks in providing content to consumers. Allegedly, Comcast has refused direct access to faster connections, with entities such as Netflix pay for access. Comcast has claimed that the deal it struck with Netflix was simply to cut out the middleman. Netflix, however, has refuted this claim, stating that absent a direct agreement with Comcast, would have to deal with a third-party transit provider. That transit provider would in turn have to negotiate with Comcast, effectively guaranteeing a company like Netflix would have to pay for access to Comcast customers. This type of dispute is only going to become more common if Comcast becomes the only game in town for the majority of New Yorkers in all areas. We've also yet to see an affirmative demonstration of the value that will be provided if this merger is allowed to proceed. Comcast has often cited its low-cost Internet Essentials program, offering $9.99 a month internet access and low-cost computers, as evidence of its commitment to close the digital divide. Although we commend Comcast for attempting to provide low-cost service, we caution that this is, as has been mentioned, already been attempted here in New York. The problem with that earlier program is that for the vast majority of families to whom it was targeted, delinquency on past bills rendered them ineligible for a new rate, not to mention the aforementioned problem with only serving families with children who qualify for free reduced lunch. We fear similar adoption rate plans with the Comcast plan here in New York. Comcast's current track record with the program is also not encouraging. According to recent reports, only 11%, although we heard here only 10% of eligible families in the current program area have taken advantage of Internet Essentials. We would consider that low subscriber rate a failure of outreach and evidence that the program has serious problems to be addressed. Prior to approval of any merger, this body should demand clear, meaningful deliverables from the companies in question as a public service to New Yorkers. This could mean requiring benchmarks in price or speed being met, as well as customer service reviews. Absent these guarantees, we would argue that the Commission's requirements have not been met. In closing, we also want to note for the record that we are disappointed this will be the only hearing in New York City on this topic, as the proposed merger is an all-stock transfer and is exempt from review by the New York City Franchise Review Committee, or FCRC. Given the tremendous potential impact in New York City, we believe this matter warrants full review at the local level. We are pressed with the lack of control in this matter. Of course, that's not this committee's problem. But thank you again for the opportunity to testify at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Cogan. Now, we have Dr. Teach out with Gordon Law School.
That's right. Thank you very much. My name is yes.
Let me just call one again. Catherine Barnes.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a very important. I need your name. My name is Zephyr Teachout. Zephyr I'm a associate professor of law at Fordham. I'm a gubernatorial candidate on the Democratic Party line and a citizen, student of history, corruption, monopolies. I think there's a lot of history here tonight. And one of the reasons I'm interested in monopolies, understood broadly, not just in terms of antitrust law, is the way in which they relate to patterns of corruption. I want to briefly address your question earlier about whether size itself might constitute a violation. A few different responses, which I can answer more fully in the comments of the Commission. First is that I think that the question suggested a more simple view of what antitrust laws mean if we take a broader view of existing antitrust laws. But yes, the mandate is different than exact tracking of other antitrust laws. It creates its own mandate, and importantly, as the prior speaker mentioned, puts the burden on the cable companies to prove that it is in public interest. That burden is quite important. I stand opposed to the premise. I start with the basic premise. New York should demand open, affordable, universal, and world-class entirely unfettered communication is the foundation of democracy. And equally importantly, entirely unfettered commerce is the foundation of strong commerce. Unfortunately, both communication and commerce are threatened. Two monopolist internet providers already provide bad and overpriced service. They are both already vertically integrated into direct ownership of content, including some of America's most important news networks. Some of the greatest content providers based here in New York may oppose this merger, but as you understand, they may be afraid to speak out against it out of fear of retaliation. So let me explain. If a content provider opposes this merger now, Time Warner or Comcast, or the new unused entity, could punish them and make it harder for them to share their content. So I hope you also take into account the silent voices of those who might not hear. There are 4 specific reasons why the PSC should oppose a merger. The first, which many have already spoken about, is that cable costs are too high, and the merger will lead to higher prices for New Yorkers. Recall that Comcast Executive Vice President David Cohen said, quote, "We are certainly not promising that customer bills will go down or increase less rapidly." Second, the new merger will allow Comcast to more fully take advantage of new FCC rules that allow dominant cable providers to put tools in place on big content providers for enhanced service. So, in other words, the merger would make it easier for Comcast to subject important New York businesses to tolls under the threat of being shut down or shut to the store. This is a kind of recipe for further consolidation of wealth and power that is bad for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and a kind of economy that we. Third, the merger will allow Comcast to cableize the internet by making it nearly impossible for any New York citizen to cut the cord and take personal control of the content that they watch. Comcast will control New York sports programming. They'll prevent companies like Netflix and startup programming providers, the kind of company that we want to encourage, for offering content that is actually competing with cable. As my running mate, Tim Wu, who couldn't be here tonight because he was accepting an anti-trust award in Washington, said, New Yorkers are crazy about their sports. If Comcast gains unfettered control over Time Warner, it will do what it can to use the Nets, Knicks, Rangers, Yankees, and others as an anti-competitive force. Finally, the merger will lead to an invisible government. That's the phrase that New Yorkers of 100 years ago used. Controlling some of the most important industries we have here, the television, video, entertainment industry. So companies like CBS, Disney, ABC, and Fox have to use Comcast to get to their customers. They have to compete against a Comcast property and NBC. That's unfair to them. And it's also unfair to New Yorkers who work for those companies. And most importantly, it is politically dangerous to have so much power over media concentrated in so few private hands. I see no way this merger serves our interests as consumers, as those who support small businesses, or as citizens. Thank you for your time.
Following Ms. Barnes will be Greg Sutton.
My name is Catherine Barnes. I'm from New York City, in a very good area. And I should be able to get good service, but I call up Time Warner on a regular basis because my Wi-Fi is off. I call up, they say, unplug it and plug it in. And it doesn't always work that way. I've had people out twice in 2 years to my apartment to fix it. Now, I've also had the previous privilege of in the Comcast hotline in Oregon, where I was in a gated community, and our way of finding out who was coming to visit us or not, or coming into the property, was through television. And Comcast was the only access we had to find it. They broke down regularly. So my problem is service. And then also, I'm a severely handicapped New Yorker in that I get $1,100 from Social Security. I pay $37 plus up to that age, and then I now have to pay $57 plus out of that $1,100 to get Time Warner. Now that is not a good amount of money to pay.
And I'm one of the better paid Social Security people too. So this is definitely not in the public interest. Also, we had a lot of window dressing from the Comcast. A lot of window dressing. They have all these wonderful little things, but do they really have them? And for how many people? And also jobs. Thousands of jobs were mentioned. Where are the jobs? When I call up anybody, I talk to somebody in Southeast Asia. I don't talk to you. Even for the political parties. Another thing too, it's not these two, but I was on a Wi-Fi contract with Verizon, and it occurred to me today, they had no business making a contract with me with that because my building doesn't even have Verizon. So I had to pay about $300 to get out of that contract. So there are a lot of things that you really have to consider, not just how good it might be, but what it really is to everybody. And I'm 74, and this country scares the hell out of me right now. We are losing so much. I grew up in the 40s and 50s when we grew tremendously because we had competition. Everybody had a chance to do something. Now, nobody does. It's them and nobody else. That's it. And that's about what I have to say. Oh, also, the sports stadiums, you know how every city has to build a sports stadium? We have the Yankee Stadium, etc. What's to stop Comcast from holding us hostage to get better contracts? What's to stop that? It's far too big, and too big to fail as it goes. We don't need it at all. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Sutton up now, and will be followed by Anthony Riddle.
My name is Greg Sutton, GREG, and I'm the Managing Director of Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And on behalf of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, the community access organization serving the borough of Manhattan, we would like to thank the New York State Public Service Commission for holding this important event. Since the inception of cable TV in New York City, community access television has been an essential and dynamic feature of New York City media. Across the 5 boroughs, community access represents the essence of localism and diversity, providing media and broadband access to a remarkable array of communities that make up the wonderful mosaic that is here. We work to meet 2 important community needs: access to the knowledge and skills that people need to thrive in the information economy, and access to high-speed internet. M&N, along with our sister organizations in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, are the largest media education institutions in the city of New York. In the last 5 years, M&N alone has averaged an annual total of more than 1,600 enrollees who have learned how to write, direct, edit, and produce high-quality television and video. Today, New York City Community Access TV outlets are the single largest cablecasters of original content anywhere in the country. At M&N, more than 500 community producers use our studios and equipment annually, and more than 1,000 Manhattan producers submit some 13,000 hours of original, independently produced content each year, including 70 live shows each quarter. Access to our studios, equipment, media education, and community events is free to anyone who lives in the borough. To put this in perspective, comparable training in the private sector would cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. M&N and community access organizations are essential contributors to economic development in a city where media and communications are leading industries. In recent years, community access organizations citywide have made expansion and inclusion a priority. In 2012, M&N opened the El Barrio Firehouse Community Media Center on 100 West Street. The M&N Firehouse has had a transformational impact on East Harlem and the uptown community, offering cultural and community events as well as cutting-edge digital media classes in English and Spanish. In 2013, the M&N El Barrio Firehouse hosted 27 community events and welcomed 845 people to the facility. In the Firehouse team is forging new partnerships with local community groups, schools, and churches, including partnerships to support our award-winning Youth Media Center, which focuses on training Manhattan's youth to create action-oriented, socially conscious media. And like other community access organizations, is a training ground for careers, a transformer of communities, and an educator of young people about how they can use media equipment, work in tools, think critically, and be creative. All of this has been thanks to the support of community media by many individuals and organizations, as well as elected officials, the New York City Council, and city and state officials. In particular, we'd like to thank Time Warner Cable, with whom we've had a positive working relationship that spans over 3 decades. In the last round of franchise renewals, public officials recognized our achievements with pride, and Time Warner greatly increased its support levels and channel capacity in an effort to expand and sustain our operation and increase our ability to serve our community. Providing these services and airing tens of thousands of hours of original, locally focused content requires resources, most notably stable, high-quality cablecast channels that allow reliable access to local voices. The programming area is simply not available on any other media outlet. We serve unserved populations with shows in many languages that address the needs of diverse ethnic communities in ways that can't be sustained on commercial media. Our programming is not replicated elsewhere. It is of high quality in both transmission standards and content. Year after year, countless external festivals and awards programs recognize them. We would like to take this opportunity to raise some important and cautionary concerns. On the Time Warner TV system citywide, MNN and other community access organizations have recently been moved off their historic location of cablecast channel clusters to what is tantamount to a digital Siberia. Last year, Time Warner Cable Channel 57, where literally hundreds of community productions have cablecast their shows for many years, was sold to the highest bidder. Community access channel citywide was moved to Time Warner Cable Channel 1997, away from any other educational or governmental access channels. Because very little publicity accompanied this move, New York City community producers and the viewers who watch their programs were left floundering. Moving forward, it's vital that MNN and other local cablecast channels are easily found and adequately publicized across all 5 boroughs. We support the clustering of local channels on the cable TV system and look forward to working with cable providers in New York City to achieve this goal while preserving and strengthening the accessibility and localism that community access provides to the city. In addition, as technology continues to enhance the picture quality of cablecast on local systems, and as both video production systems and consumer capabilities also, it's essential that community access television and local cable channels become available in the highest quality format, including in high definition television. The funding for community access organizations is currently based on the number of cable subscribers in our boroughs. And in the coming years, an increasing number of customers may migrate to internet-only subscriptions due to a surge in the availability of streaming devices that deliver programming. We need to work together to ensure that the funding stream provided through cable TV subscriptions will be extended to parallel means of viewership. This shift will preserve our ability to provide high-quality local programming and innovative training programs that seek to close the gap and lessen the digital divide for all citizens. MNN is preparing the next generation of technology users, but we need the continued and evolving support of franchisees to do so. We look forward to partnering with the city and state governments and with Comcast should its merger with Time Warner Cable be approved. Together, we can ensure that community service, localism, and diversity continue to grow and thrive in ever-changing media and technology ways.
Thank you. Up now is Anthony Riddle representing Brick, followed by Catherine Williston.
My name is Anthony Riddle. Okay. I'm the co-director of Community Media Public Access. On behalf of the people of Brooklyn, Rick thanks the members of the Public Service Commission for holding this hearing. Time Warner operates a profitable business, public rights of way belonging to all the people of the city of New York. In exchange for use of this unique public property, the city receives payments in the form of cash and communication systems for use by the people, both cable and network. Public access organizations also receive support and distribution capacity. We consider administration of these resources a sacred trust. Our organizations use these resources to create community, to deliver services, to bridge a growing digital divide between the haves and have-nots. We offer training. Community access organizations funded through grant agreements with franchise holders help to bridge the digital divide by training thousands of people a year on the most modern audio-visual equipment. We offer a wide variety of classes in video, production, editing, graphics, sound, and lighting, and also offer introductions to the use of social media for distribution. Comparable training at other facilities in New York costs thousands of dollars. Our classes regularly have waiting lists and draw heavily from neighborhoods that would otherwise not have access to training resources. More than 5,000 adults learn to make video programs using high-quality equipment at our facility every year. This year alone, Rick offered media training at more than 12 public schools, over 12,000 schools on a regular basis. Rick training and support enabled by the grant agreements can have a profound effect on a community with special needs. In the past year, Rick's new Media Share program has provided customized training programs for staff and volunteers at 17 nonprofits doing great work for the community, including the staff from Helen Keller Services, including some visually impaired staff members, are being taught to edit program video using smartphones and professional editing. Staff and volunteers from You Gotta Believe were successfully trained to produce the Adopting Teens and Tweens show, a program promoting the adoption of older children. The Diaspora Community Services was taught to make PSAs promoting their direct services to women living with HIV, the youth health advocates, and in particular, Brooklyn's Haitian community, both here and the diaspora. We offer facilities. Brick Studios, location equipment, media lab, and edit suites are all offered free of charge to Brooklyn residents and community organizations. We are open 7 days a week to accommodate the schedules of working class people and students. We provide technical staff to support productions and engineers to keep everything going. Rick has also established an important new relationship with the Brooklyn Public Library. We now offer video and social media classes at DPL branches in neighborhoods across the borough. In addition, our producers can now check out digital video equipment in these branches in their own neighborhoods. More than 600 community residents have taken classes at these branches in the first year of operation. We are expanding these locations in an effort to provide services tailored to the unique character of Brooklyn's many neighborhoods. Programming. Rick offers channel time care to the Brooklyn public on a first-come, first-served basis. We are a free speech forum that does not judge the programs as long as they meet basic legal and technical standards. Every quarter, more than 500 volunteers submit programs that we broadcast on 4 cable channels with 550,000 homes, as well as internationally over the internet. Over the past 25 years, Rick has broadcast an estimated 500,000 hours of programming. 500,000 hours of programming. These programs represent every culture, language, nationality, and political viewpoint found in Brooklyn. More importantly, we have been the only forum for many who are never seen or fairly represented in mainstream media, providing vital, hyper local media coverage of Brooklyn neighborhoods, issues, culture, and people. Since the launch of Rick produced Brooklyn Independent Media in October 2013, over 1,100 Brooklyn-based and Brooklyn-affiliated guests have appeared on BK Live, Brooklyn's first ever live daily show. Brooklyn Independent Media Civic Affairs programming highlights civic events, community board meetings, live debates, and interviews with local elected officials. Finally, this is what we ask for. We already have a relationship with Time Warner. We came to an agreement with them, and we would like to have a recommitment ceremony with Comcast if they're going to come into the neighborhood. This is difficult if rewarding work We all ask that public access operations and commitments to the city be kept whole through this transition and the remainder of the current franchise agreement. This is possible through the following conditions. Channels. Maintain the PEG channel capacity at levels in current franchise agreement. Cablecast PEG channels with the same quality as the commercial channels. Keep the PEG channels in easily accessed, stable locations. Financial support. Commit to stable financial support for public access services, vital training and production and distribution services now provided to the digitally underserved populations and hyper-local media coverage, regardless of any shift in the cable markets facilitated by the concentration of market power or otherwise. And finally, assure that city revenues from franchise agreements continue at least the current levels, again, regardless of any shift in the way the cable markets are defined, the way the cable customers are. We look forward to partnering with the city and state governments and with Comcast to ensure that if this merger goes through, it helps to close the digital divide. We can do this by increasing our opportunity to develop partnerships with schools and libraries, training people on the latest technology, and ensuring New Yorkers continue to have access to high-quality local news programs.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Catherine Williston is up now, and next will be Mr. Paul Sasse.
My name is Catherine Williston. I'm a resident of New York and simply a volunteer with Common Cause. I'm a long-time customer of Time Warner Cable. I currently pay Time Warner $131 for cable television service. In addition, I pay Verizon $159 for my landline, my cell phone, my DSL. In total, I pay $290 per month for the telecommunications utility. I would like to take my business elsewhere to get a better deal, but Time Warner and Verizon are my only options where I live on the upper side. I have a friend, Barbara, who lives in London. She pays not quite £34, about $58 a month for the same services, better services, faster services. And her package includes long-distance students from Commonwealth countries for as far away as New Zealand and Australia. Free. Barbara has 17 providers in London to choose from. What has happened to the idea of competition in the marketplace that provides services, choices to customers so they can shop around for better prices? What has happened is big money in our political system. So far this year, Comcast has contributed almost $2 million to the campaign coffers of members on strategic committees in Congress. Comcast has spent an additional $18 million last year on lobbying efforts to lobby to convince lawmakers and regulators to overlook antitrust considerations and to support the corporate interests over public interests. Time Warner recently sent me a Dear Customer letter in which they trumpeted their proposed merger with Comcast. The letter stated that Time Warner and Comcast were, quote, dedicated to delivering a great customer experience. They did not mention how much extra these great customer experiences would cost each. The reality is this merger is dedicated to blunting competition in order to increase the political muscle of Time Warner and to increase their corporate bottom line. I urge you to recognize it.
Thank you, Mr. Williston. Next, and following Mr. Alsati, Frankie Miranda representing
Thank you, members of this esteemed commission. I feel very nervous that Paul Alsati, A-L-E-A-T. I feel nervous on Paul that I was speech because I was a kingmaker to the big fat cap that trying to dominate our little and diverse state. Now, I'm here because I am a working consumer. I'm a working man. I still have to live with my family because it is a very tough economic time. It's very hard for a working man like me to live in America. And now my family has struggled with rising rates and middling quality when it comes to broadband. I'm worried that with this upcoming potential merger, this poor quality is rising prices will increase. Now, the honorable gentleman representing Comcast, he's made some seemingly valid points regarding the upcoming merger. He mentioned things like New York State will be able to plug into a better network for redundancy. Now, redundancy is one of the fancy words, fancy word. Redundancy is simply a simpler way of saying backup. He's saying it's going to provide backup. He's also going to be also saying that we'll be able to leave a better resource. Through this merger, they will be able to meet consumer demand by leveraging more resources and more expertise. But the problem with this argument is that there has to be more better ways to serve the needs of their customers in a merger, which is obviously a way to feed their bottom line at the expense of the consumer. I will not have this. As a working man, as a member of my family that has struggled with bills, as a member of my community, as a New Yorker, as an American, I cannot let this stand, and I implore you, members of the Honorable Commission, to try to do everything in your power to block this merger. Also, I would like to speak as a member of the Hispanic community in the United States. There are many of them. The problem with this merger is that NBC Universal, they own Telemundo. They're competing with Univision, and the CEO of Univision, his name is Randy Falco, he has come out against this merger. Why? Because Telemundo, owned by NBC Universal, which is owned by Time Warner, they have access to 91% of Hispanic households in the United States. To let this merger go through will be to allow more domination of households like mine. This will mean higher prices for very important programs. This is how we get our news about our culture back home. This is where we get our entertainment. To mean higher prices for us and probably lower quality programming. And that is why I further implore you to do everything in your power to block this merger. And I would like to conclude by offering a little history lesson for everyone in this room. During the Gilded Age, the robber barons, they ruled the railways, and they preyed on their customers. I implore each and every member of this commission to stop the future robber barons from controlling the pathways of the internet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda, and following you will be Jeff DeMarco.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Frankie Miranda, M-I-R-A-N-D. I am the Senior Vice President of the Hispanic Federation, a service-oriented membership organization of nearly 100 Latino health and human service agencies dedicated to promote social, political, and economic well-being for the Latino community. The Federation provides a wide range of services geared towards strengthening Hispanic families and supporting Latino institutions, serving well over 2 million Hispanics living in our region. I am here not to speak or weigh in on the proposal. I'm here to provide a different perspective. I'm here to speak about the extraordinary investments that Comcast has provided to the Hispanic residents of the state of New York through its support to the Hispanic Federation programs. For almost a decade now, Comcast has partnered with the Hispanic Federation in numerous efforts that have improved the quality of life of thousands of New York residents, especially those of Latino descent. To name a few examples, Comcast has supported our efforts to educate parents about the importance of early childhood education and provide them with tools that will help their children obtain critical skills before their first day of kindergarten. During the 2010 census, Comcast joined our efforts to reach as many New Yorkers as possible to educate them about the critical importance of their participation and driving needed sources to the region. Thousands have been registered to vote, and many more have been educated on their civil rights and duties thanks in part to Comcast's commitment to our mission. MovimientoHispano.org, Hispanic Movement, a voter registration and civic engagement digital platform, was launched thanks to partnership with Comcast. And right now it's in its fourth year. Movimiento has become a bilingual multi-platform voter registration and civic participation campaign. I cannot emphasize enough how tremendously important these Comcast initiatives are to our children, our families, our community. In summation, Comcast has been a pioneer and long-standing supporter of many of our causes, providing quality educational programming to diverse communities throughout our region. We value immensely their partnership and ongoing commitment to community service and empowerment. Thank
Mr. Galacco speaking now, will be followed by Jeff Thompson, also the.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Jack from Rockwood, BBB, AEC. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jack from Rockwood, and I'm an intern for Comcast New York, nonpartisan government group, and a resident of Westchester County. I'm here to share my perspectives with the consumer and neighborhood residents, and express my deep concerns regarding the implications of the proposed merger to our community. As has been widely discussed, this merger poses very real threats to our state and its people's general welfare. Public prosperity, in both social and economic contexts, is in today's world dependent on access to high-speed, affordable, and responsive internet and cable service. Given the fact that Americans pay far more than citizens of other developed countries for internet, and at a substantially slower speeds, which I, as a college student, am unfortunately all too familiar with, we are in dire need of serious reform. Our nation's competitive edge is dependent on the strengthening of these services. The competition between providers is the most effective force available to achieve this end. Comcast loves to claim that one of the foremost reasons why they're pursuing this merger is to better serve us, their customers. They say that if only they grow bigger and consume a greater portion of the telecommunications market share, they will be able to innovate and ultimately produce a better service to a wider range of people. This is all despite the fact that Comcast is already the U.S.'s largest cable provider and consistently ranked among the absolute lowest in customer satisfaction ratings. The company won the Consumer's 2014 Worst Company in America Award earlier this year and received an F for General Corporate Governance by Corporate Library, an independent shareholder research organization. Yet they still retain the position of the world's largest and most profitable mass media and communications company. So I've been questioning how it is that Comcast is still so successful, despite their deeply unsatisfied customer base, something that defies the promises of capitalism. Why should we believe that allowing them to become even bigger, permitting them to own 55% of the market for traditional cable service in New York State, would somehow be a key ingredient in making their service better and customers more satisfied? On what basis can we believe this? What lessons does history or basic economic theory teach us about allowing monopolies to exist and its effects on the consuming public? What is a company's incentive to improve if it does not face competition with the threat of failure? Perhaps most important, however, is how this merger will violate New York's most basic tenets. Fundamentally, New York is a state rooted in the concepts of innovation, competition, efficiency, and progress. Here, we believe in a system where those who play by the rules and maybe even help serve others in the process have the opportunity to flourish, not those who lie, cheat, and exploit their way to the top. As documented in the high-profile Bloomberg LP, the Comcast Cable Communications case, Comcast has sought to pursue their own interests by deliberately understaffing. In this case, the company participated in discrimination of, quote, video programming distribution on the basis of affiliation and non-affiliation vendors, end quote, deciding not to place Bloomberg News among news channels that accompanied Advocacy's merger with NBC, despite being deliberately told by the FCC it could not embrace such news. Why should we believe that they will not employ similar tactics again to get to an more significant extent? How can we trust the company to uphold the virtue of net neutrality, particularly considering how it was sought to implement a data cap as a means of becoming even more profitable? We must work as hard as we can to hold Comcast accountable to prevent any future issues from arising in these areas. So, I ask our public officials, will you embrace a New York in which the wealthy and powerful are permitted to become more wealthy and powerful at the direct expense of we the people? A New York in which these excessive businesses are subject not to rules, regulations, or its customers, but to political power granted them? A New York in which monopolism is favored over innovation, choice, and progress? I implore you to make the right decision. decision that will allow our state to support these communities and others. I urge you to block this proposed merger.
Jeff Thompson, Common Cause, will be followed by Timothy Carr of Craigslist.
I think this will
My name is Jeff Thompson, JEFFTHOMS. Thank you very much, Judge, and other commissioners, for this opportunity to